not understanding why it was so important until I was much older and could no longer enjoy it again. Then rebelling and thinking that I could satisfy my own need for recognizing myself in weird, ethnic marriage. What I've experienced growing up is what the Americans call Generation X, children of the 70s, post-war, where my husband was weird because my granddad was in prison from 1967 until 1970, accused of being an Igbo sympathizer because he saved lives in September in Makodi, 1966. Our stories cross each other. Behind the pain, behind the memories we carry, we must remember that there were significant heroes who did the right thing at great significant personal cost. But I didn't come to break your heart, I came to celebrate who is coming up after me. So, I don't read popular discourse finish, I don't hear the manuscript. 2 years later, my first novel will be published, An Alternate History of Nigeria's Past, where I examined a story I grew up with that I found that none of my mates knew about. Nobody knew. My mother knew because she was a Civil War refugee. She was in Benin, growing up in Maria Goretti. When on October 10th, 1967, they came to call her best friend. She heard her best friend shouting and wailing. She had lost her father, 2 uncles and 2 brothers in Asaba. My mother told me that story growing up in Bori. I mentioned it to classmates who were like, waiting with that, man, talk true, Asaba massacre. Worried people can be flippant, it doesn't mean they don't care. But that was what my novel was about. It wasn't a very good novel. So I attended the Chimamanda workshop, the first workshop, working on my second novel, which was a response to popular discourse. And I read, and I went there like an overstudied medical doctor and got a very bad reputation as the apropos of the class. She called me overstudied in class, but then she called me writer. And I've never forgotten that. From being a reader, to being a student, to being a friend, when she gave me the title for the novel that I thought was a successor to popular discourse titled Fine Boys. One reader. Thank you. Then eventually leaving medicine to become a publisher, and in 2018 she decided to give me an entire catalog of work. Now we fight, it's not all love, we quarrel a lot. At times royalty not will come. At times I will send over messages when this is good, but she say, please leave me. But there's one thing I've always appreciated her for that you will also see in her new book. She has the eye. She sees. Behind the voice, behind the other peculiarities of crafts, behind that defeatingly this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chimamanda Adiche.
Ibu mulum, cece begini deh, cece begini, ibu mulum. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. Again, good evening to everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And I have to apologize for being late. People never can see me. I'm very sorry. I won't know where people get men a fight because we don't have a fight. We have a mistake. I've made that. So I'm very happy to be here again. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. And I want to start by thanking the Center for Memories because they're doing the essential work of preserving our collective memories. I also want to thank my dear friend James Uals. James. Okay. I want to thank James for the depth of his love for Igbo land, and I want to thank him for the breadth of his intellect. James actually persuaded me to deliver a lecture today rather than to read from Dream Camp. Dream Camp was published in March, different parts of the world, and now I am here, back home in Nigeria, and I consider this my homecoming. I was in Lagos a few days ago. I was in Abuja just 2 days ago, and now I am here in Enugu. I'm here in this beautiful city on the hill. I am here in the city of my birth. So I drew my first breath about 2 kilometers away from where we are today, at the University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital on September 15, 1977. So although I was born in Enugu, I grew up in Nsukka on the campus of the University of Nigeria. I am from Aba in Nchikoka local government area of Anambra State. My mother is from Umunachi in Dunukofia local government area of Anambra State. All are my homes. But more importantly, and I think more significantly, I consider all of Igbo land to be my home. From Enugu to Anambra, Imo, Abia, Ebonyi, and the Igbo-speaking communities in Rivers, in Kogi, in Benue, in Delta. All of them are home because all of them are Igbo land. Igbo. Whenever I land at an airport, whether in Asaba or in Enugu or the wonderfully named Chino Achebe International Airport in Umueri, the overwhelming feeling for me is one of wholeness, an internal calm, an instinctive ancestral peace. Or so it was for many years, until recently. I am not the only Igbo person who no longer feels this instinctive wholeness, this peace. I am not the only one who reads stories from Igbo land and turns away in horror, who sees what is happening in Igbo land today and is consumed by shock, disillusionment, and a feeling dangerously close to despair. In Igbo culture, nothing is more sacred than life. In Igbo culture, a sibling must never take the life of another sibling. That is what we mean when we call a child Nduka, Ndubisi,
that's my name,
Ndude. The preservation of life is sacrosanct. Things Fall Apart demonstrates the central Igbo belief in the sacredness of life. Okonkwo accidentally murders a member of his community. It is truly an accident. His gun goes off during a feast, and yet his community punishes him severely. His home is destroyed and burnt, and he's banished for years. And this was an accident. But the larger point is that Igbo people have long been known for greatness. Igbo. And many of us are proud to say that our children do not speak Igbo. Now, languages are really wonderful. I think the more languages one can speak, the better. I personally would like to learn Hausa. I've always loved the music of the language. But the truth is that children can learn as many languages as we expose them to. But what is happening in Igbo land is not about whether children can learn languages or not. It is the result of the lack of value for what is ours. We do not value what is ours. And this lack of value is also reflected even in the contemporary Igbo practice of giving strange names to our children. Names we like, not because of their beautiful or deep meanings, but because they can be easily shortened to sound Western. Cassie, Sarah, Jida. Nana Zayeli Afane Wemisu. If any of you have those names, I won't blame you, it's your parents I blame. But as an aside, I've noticed during my book signings, and I've done many book signings, but particularly the ones here in Nigeria, I've noticed that many of my Yoruba fans who come to have their book signed and they tell me their names, they always say very proudly their full names. And I have to tell you, I find this deeply admirable, but also I feel a kind of whimsical sadness, because that almost never happens with my Igbo fans. Somebody once said to me when I was talking about how important it was for us to conserve our language, not only is that an example of remarkable stupidity, but we must remember that human needs are not merely material. So this person was talking about, I don't want my child to learn Igbo, Igbo will confuse my child will not get a good job. But human needs are not merely material. We must feed our bodies, of course. We must think about what will give us a good job. But our souls must also be fed. And it is dignity that feeds our souls. So the country of Iceland has about 400,000 people, a very tiny country, but they put so much effort into preserving their language. I've never heard an Icelandic person, the few times I've visited, say something like, "Eji Icelandic ejebe." And Ireland, the Irish language, which was in decline under English rule, recently, the Irish government has put a lot of effort into reviving the Irish language. The Irish language is spoken only in Ireland. The Irish language is not really a language that is going to get the Irish people international jobs, but they're preserving it. They're preserving it, and that act of preservation is an act of love, it is an act of value, it is an act of dignity. And so to anyone who says, not only are you lacking in intelligence, sorry, but this is true, you must also remember that we must feed our souls with dignity. And so while all of these issues, language, names, are significant, we must focus now on the large fire that is burning up Igbo land. Ndi Igbo kanyi teta n'ụla. Let us wake up. Ife emebigo na anyị Igbo. As Igbo people, we often speak of political marginalization. Whenever you're gathered among Igbo people, the next thing you hear is marginalization. They're marginalizing us. We should talk about marginalization. I think any honest assessment of Nigerian history since 1970 must acknowledge the political marginalization that Igbo people have suffered. But it is time to suspend the subject of marginalization until we have cleaned house. we are giving those who want to marginalize us even more reasons to justify that marginalization. We must first clean house. Part of that house cleaning must involve a concerted return to unity. We must unite. We must unite. Unity is not the absence of difference. Unity does not mean that we all agree on everything.